Hi everyone, and welcome to this Year 10 GCSE Sociology lesson on the functionalist view of education, where I will attempt to answer the question, what do functionalists think is the purpose of education, in the first part only looking at the work of Emil Durkheim. First thing I'd like you to do is a quick starter, which gives you a chance to recap your knowledge of functionalism in general. So what I'd like you to do is pause here in a second and write down all the concepts on this slide that you would associate with the functionalist theory. So I'll say that again, pause now and write down which of these concepts you think link to functionalism, and just ignore the ones that don't. So there in purple are the answers. So which concepts link to functionalism? We've got organic analogy, institutions, socialization, happy, function, and consensus, which means agreement. Your next task is to pause again and turn them into a short summary of functionalism, 1 or 2 sentences at most. How can you link those key concepts together to make a short summary of functionalist theory? And here's my version. So if you were struggling, I've done one for you to give you a bit of an idea, but everybody should have in their notes the functionalist view of society, and mine goes as follows. Functionalists believe society works like a human body, that all the institutions within it have important functions to fulfill that help society run smoothly and keep everyone happy. This is called the organic analogy. Functionalism is a consensus or agreement theory because they have a positive outlook on society. So if you remember when we did this way back at the end of year 9, we looked at things like the Lego movie clip, everything's awesome, everyone's cool when they're part of the team. All of those ideas linked together to show the functionist view of society, that we are looking for agreement, we're trying to keep everyone happy, and everybody has important jobs to do to keep society running smoothly. So how does this link to education? And that's the big question for today's lesson and the next lessons ahead. So functionalists have looked at how this theory, how this idea that they have applies to the education system. And the main question that they then ask is, what's the point or what's the purpose of education? And the big question for us today is, what are the functions of the education system? What does it do for individuals and what does it do for society? And that's the big question that we're going to be looking at. The first function that we're going to learn about today is the function of social solidarity. And this comes from the work of French sociologist Emil Durkheim. You can see him up there with his really cool little glasses on. One of the founding fathers of sociology. He's a really important guy and has taught us many things about the way society works. And he looked at the education system and he said that one of the most important things the education system does is it brings people together to build a sense of solidarity amongst people. So social solidarity is just the idea that people are bound together, that they share the same norms and values, that there's agreement. That's why functionalism is a consensus theory. So he had a really rosy, positive outlook on society. And he said that the education system is an important part of secondary socialization. It teaches all people the same norms and values, which binds everybody together. And then if we move slightly to the right, he said this is through both the formal curriculum and the informal curriculum. So there are many ways that school does this. It doesn't just sort of hand you a certificate on the first day and say, yep, welcome to education. You are now bound to society forevermore. It's an ongoing process. It does it through your formal curriculum. So the specific subjects you learn bind you together and teach you things and norms and values about your society that make it run smoothly. So Durkheim thought that the most important subject for this by far was history. And he said that by learning our shared past, that where we've come from, it binds us together as a society and helps us to learn the same norms and values. I put forward cases for subjects also sociology or geography or even PE for teaching those sort of skills and things that we need to know that bind us together. He also talked about the informal curriculum. Now, these are the hidden things that you learn, the soft skills that you learn within school. Things like getting along with people, being part of a community, following the rules, following a timetable, wearing a uniform. And Durkheim said that all of these things added together, if you think about things like how a uniform is meant to bind people, how sitting in an assembly teaches you about community and belonging to something bigger, Durkheim said that these formal and informal curriculum, these skills that you learn, combine together to teach children their norms and values, which bind them into a shared society with everybody else. What I want you to do now then is to pause here, and I'd like you to make a quick list for question 1 of the things you learn in your formal and informal curriculums. So have 2 little lists, 5 things minimum on each side, thinking about your curriculum. What do you learn in your formal curriculum? Essentially, what subjects do you take? And what sort of soft skills, what sort of more informal skills do you think you learn within school? Obviously in normal times, not COVID ones. Question number 2, I want you to have a think about in what ways you are taught to be a part of your culture through school. Can you give a couple of examples? So was Durkheim right? Are you learning your culture by being at school? The second function that Durkheim spoke about was how the education system teaches specialist skills. He said that schools teach important skills that are needed for the economy to prosper. So he said that if you're thinking about that organic analogy, schools have an important function to fulfill because other institutions are relying on schools to teach children certain things. So, for example, everyone needs their basics in reading, writing, and maths. That makes sense. You can't even get the most basic job if you don't have some of those skills. But as we get older, we can specialize in different subjects, in different areas. We can learn different skills and ideas, which all channel us into certain jobs as we get older. And Durkheim argued that it's important for the economy, for the rest of society, that students come away with the tools that they need to keep the economy going. That other parts of society are relying on schools teaching these things. So the economy won't function. We won't have people to run the criminal justice system. We won't have people to work in the media if they aren't taught skills that they need to do those jobs through the education system. Your next task then, another pause in a second. 2 questions. Number 1, do you think you are learning the skills that you need to get you a job in the future? Okay, why or why not? Explain your choice. Is there something you think you could be learning differently? Do you think there's a different course? Or do you think it's pretty accurate, it's spot on? And question number 2, how have the needs of the economy changed over time? Think back 20, 30, 40 years ago. Is this change in the economy reflected in what children learn in school? Now, to answer that, you're probably going to need to do a bit of research. And what I'd like you to do is to ask an adult, anyone, you can FaceTime someone, you can call them, you can shout down to the kitchen, whatever it might be. Ask an adult, the oldest one you can find, what subjects or skills they learnt when they were at school. Compare them to your curriculum now. It doesn't need to be a massive in-depth interview, just a really quick question. Do they think they learnt the skills that they needed to help them in the future? Are they contributing to the economy? How is it different or the same to what you're learning now? And that might influence your answer to question 1. If you think back, are you learning what you need to learn to get you that job in the future, to make you contribute to the economy? So pause and answer those questions. And finally, what I'd like you to do is to develop the work that you did last lesson on designing a school. So think more specifically today about the curriculum. Design a curriculum that you think best suits the demands of the 21st century. So what subjects should students be learning today? How much time should be spent on each? So for example, your English and your maths and your science take up most of your curriculum time. Is that right? Is that how it should be? And how important do you think the informal curriculum is? Assemblies, interview skills, PE, teamwork. Do we give enough time to those things, or do you think we should give some more? And then just evaluate overall. Do you think the education system in 2021 is geared up to meet the demands of the workforce in the future? What are your thoughts based on today's lesson?